A warm welcome to all of you and a big salute to James. James, welcome on board.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you around.
Thank you. I thought we would talk about the planets today, just planetary aspects. Not aspects, but mainly conjunctions. What the planets do, what the sun does when it's conjunct Jupiter, what it does when it's conjunct Mercury. And I'll just tell you, how I see them. Of course, there's, lots of different explanations and all, but I'll just tell you just a few little things of whatever I've noticed about conjunctions. Okay?
Right.
Okay, so start with sun, moon, conjunction.
Right.
Or opposition. So the sun, when it's conjunct the moon, first of all, you need to look with all these aspects, how close the planets are, whether it's the opposition or the conjunction. Are they within 3 or 4 degrees, or are they within 10 or 12 degrees? But even if they're in the same sign, they're going to be conjunct. And they'll also be conjunct if, say, the sun is 27 degrees Taurus and the moon is 3 degrees Gemini. They are conjunct. You don't see it because they're in separate signs, but you better know it because they will function. So the new moon, the sun conjunct moon, the main thing that I find about that is that the people that have it have a very strong tendency to have both masculine and feminine energies. They can be masculine and strong when they want to, and they can be soft and feminine when they want to, which most people cannot do. We have a very famous actor, well, he's dead now, but Marlon Brando was a very big actor. And if you know this aspect and you watch him, you go, oh yeah, he can be really tender and yet really strong. The other thing about the sun-moon conjunction is that oftentimes the person has too close of a connection to their original family. Now this is more, I should say it to Westerners, because in India, the family is way closer. Parents are way closer to their children. It's a strong, but if you're doing charts for Westerners, if a man has the sun conjunct moon, the wife is likely to wind up complaining after some years. Why are you you always have to worry about your parents and your original family? You're in the new family now, okay? So it creates a very strong connection. Remember that if the moon is near the sun, it's burned. The moon is not helped by being near the sun. So that means that for a woman, the menstrual cycle, the breast, the brain. So if Mercury and the moon are afflicted, the person has headaches, or they'll get brain tumors when they're older. So the moon is the brain, the menstrual cycle. Just the moon being with the sun is probably not enough to make a huge problem. It'll make a problem. But if the moon is conjunct the sun, that's number one problem. And then if the moon gets another aspect from Mars or Saturn or Ketu or something, then that moon is in deep trouble. Okay, so it's an affliction. For the sun is quite happy to be aspected by the moon. The sun becomes stronger. It's better. Person has a sun moon, it's better for the relationship with the father. It's usually better. And then the opposition, of course, is the full moon, and the full moon is wonderful, except you don't really want to have the moon in the opposition within 10 degrees. Is not good. It's better if it's a full moon, but the moon is, say the moon is 3 degrees Pisces and the sun is 20 degrees Virgo. It's a full moon, but it's a lot better than if the moon is 5 Pisces and the sun is 5 Virgo. That's bad. Because if the sun is tightly opposite the moon, it's bad. It causes several problems. First of all, it oftentimes means that the parents were not harmonious at the conception. They could be harmonious when the child is being raised, but at the conception they weren't. And the masculine and feminine energies, they don't work so well together. And the person also has problems with self-acceptance. And they go after relationships where the partner wants to change them. So the partner wants to change them because when they chose their partner, they chose a partner that didn't really accept them, and that felt comfortable. After they're with the partner, it's no longer comfortable that the partner is telling them to change. But the problem is not the partner. The partner is that they don't accept themselves because the moon has been hurt by the sun.
I have found, James, just as you said, I have found in practical cases in my readings that if sun and moon are opposite, then the parents do not get along well. As you said, they may not be well enough in the conception, but I
Yeah,
found that even in the
yeah,
daily
usually,
life, there was a lot of uh, disharmony between the parents. They were
usually,
not in sync,
yeah,
and I also found that these kind of people can end up having an abusive relationship just to gain, as you said, acceptance by others. They can accept a abusive relationship because they want to be accepted at a certain level.
Mm. Okay, Sun Mercury. So the Sun Mercury is a very, so we won't be able to say everything about, I won't, this, I'm trying to compact this. So the Sun Mercury is a very common aspect because Mercury is never far away from the sun. So the Sun Mercury conjunction is probably the most typical conjunction out of all astrology. It happens quite a bit. So the Sun Mercury, the sun is the Atma or the soul. And if the soul is near Mercury, it's an intellectual lifetime usually.
Hmm.
It's not a lifetime for, I mean, of course there's the rest of the chart, but the Sun Mercury makes the person an intellectual. Even if their field is something like sports or something, they're still going to be an intellectual. However, the closer that Mercury gets to the sun, the harder it is for Mercury. Mercury becomes burned. Now, I don't take it to be quite like if there's a Jupiter-Sun conjunction within 4 degrees, I would say that sun is going to hurt Jupiter more than the sun would hurt Mercury at a 4-degree aspect, only because they're so close anyway. But if Mercury gets within 2 or 3 degrees of the sun, you have nervous problems with the lungs, the nervous system, the intestines, etc. And what you really have to watch out for is if the sun is conjunct Mercury in Libra, if the sun is conjunct the fallen
Sun.
sun, that's going to hurt worse. I have an interesting situation where Mercury is 3 degrees Libra and the sun is 29 Virgo. That Mercury is very hurt. It's 3 degrees away, but which is not too bad, but it's hurt more because Mercury's in Libra getting the sun energy. And likewise with the sun moon, of course it's going to be worse if the moon is in Scorpio and you're having that. So look at the signs as well. But the sun Mercury is a simple aspect. It doesn't need a lot of explanation. Now, the thing is that people that have health problems oftentimes have the people that have health problems that they have hard time diagnosing, it's usually because it's a combination of afflicted Mercury and afflicted Jupiter. Mercury is the nervous system, and it gets afflicted by being near the sun or whatever, any other affliction. And then if Jupiter is also afflicted, then they have allergies. The combination of the allergies plus the nervous system creates health problems that you say, what? This is a weird problem. It's because it's a combination. The Sun-Mars aspect, it's an aspect that makes a person kind of a fighter. They always have a certain amount of anger. Depends on how close it is, but there's an agitation to Sun Mercury. There's always an agitation. On the positive side, the person can be aggressive and assertive, and they can do sports. They can be, it's a good aspect. It's usually better. Well, I'd say sometimes I think it's better in a woman because then she can be assertive when she needs to be, which a lot of times because of the culture they can't. So they can be assertive. But both of those planets will be harmed a little bit. Mars will be harmed because it's next to a malefic sun. Sun will be harmed because it's next to Mars. So it depends on how tight the aspect is, and it depends on where it is. If it's, in Cancer, it's very bad for the sun. It's bad for both. But so the problems to the sun would be the heart, the physical heart. It would be the back, the lower back, and the spine.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger problems for the lower back and the spine come with Sun Saturn. But anytime the sun is afflicted, it can cause those problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it can cause problems with the father. It can mean either the father is particularly aggressive and assertive, or it can simply mean that the relationship with the father is tense. It can mean either one. The Sun-Venus is an interesting aspect. The Sun-Venus aspect conjunction. Now, let me go back. If you have the sun opposite Mars, which is rare, very, very rare, but when you have that, then you have to watch out for, question is, was there violence? There could be violence from the father. It doesn't have to be physical violence, but it could be
Mental violence also.
Yeah.
Mental abuse.
Mental abuse, yeah. In the Sun-Venus, the Sun-Venus conjunction is an interesting one.
James, if it is exactly opposite Sun, Mars, there would be times when Mars would also be retrograde.
Yeah, still, that the retrograde is not going to make a big difference to the sun.
Okay.
Now, if the aspect is retrograde and applying to the opposition, that's a lot worse than if it's retrograde and separating. So in other words, the sun is always moving forward.
Right.
So let's say that the sun is 5 Leo, okay? If Mars is 7 Aquarius, backing up to 5 Aquarius, that's really bad. That's applying to the sun. Right. That's bad.
Right.
If the sun is 5 Leo and Mars is 4 Aquarius, going backwards to 3, 2, 1, it's separating. So it's better if it's separating with a malefic. It's going to have more power if it's applying. But if it's close, it's still going to have that effect. The Sun-Venus is very interesting. Many models have this aspect. People that model clothing and stuff like that. Now, the Sun-Venus is very, very charming. Makes the person charmed, and they feel very happy inside. The soul feels happy. But the problem is it makes them lazy. It can make them lazy. So if I see a Sun-Venus conjunction, that's the most typical lazy aspect I know of. And if I see that aspect, I look to the rest of the chart and I hope that there will be some serious afflictions to make the person have some suffering so that they can have some ambition and desire. If the rest of the chart is very easy and smooth and there's a Sun-Venus, these people will not accomplish much. They don't need to. They're very happy. They're a little bit lazy, like that. Yeah. The other thing that I don't like about Sun-Venus, and it's a wonderful aspect, it makes them happy and they're charmed and they look good. It's great with the father, but there's some things I don't like. And the other thing I don't like is that the closer that Venus gets to the sun, the more it hurts love matters. And if you think about it like this, Venus is love and the sun is fire, hot ball of fire. Their relationships, they burn out. They come and they go, they burn out. So it's a difficult aspect. That's basically it. But they feel very happy and they're charmed. And
but if there's a planet in between, say like Mercury, which generally...
That's a whole other story. That's a whole other story. It's a completely different story now. If you put a third planet in there, then we've got to look at where that planet is, where the degrees are.
Okay.
That I talk about when we do horoscopes, because it'll get complicated. I've got a lot of aspects to do here. Sun Jupiter. The Sun Jupiter aspect, the sense of humor. Sun or moon, Jupiter. My son has a Sun Jupiter conjunction. Sense of humor is, oh my God, some of the stories I could tell you when he was in school that he just has a great sense of humor. And that's with Sun Jupiter or Moon Jupiter. The Sun Jupiter makes the person protected. Sun Venus also gives some charm and some protection. But Sun Jupiter, Moon Jupiter, the protection is enormous. Of course, if it's within 5 degrees, like my son has within 5 degrees, the amount of time, one time he fell in the pool and I was around the fence, I didn't see it. He fell in the pool, he was 2 years old or something like that, but he fell right on the creepy crawly, on the vacuum. He has so many stories like this. This guy, he was walking in a parking lot, guy jammed on the brakes, he almost hit him. My son was on a skateboard. My son flies up into the air, lands on his back, but he had a backpack on. So he flies up in the air, hits the back and waves at the guy because the guy was freaked out. That's the Sun Jupiter or Moon Jupiter. You're always the Sun Jupiter is not so good for dealing with gurus. It's good on one level because the person is charmed and the Sun Jupiter will give them a sense of faith in God, faith that everything is okay, and gurus like that. But if Jupiter gets too close to the sun, it's going to get burned. And that's going to cause allergies and liver sensitivities and some troubles with gurus because Jupiter gets burned. Now, if Jupiter is too close to the sun or some other planet, Mars, Saturn, or something like that, you always advise the person that, listen, if you ever have a lawsuit, try to settle it out of court. Because if Jupiter is afflicted and you get in front of a judge, they're not going to like you. I had a client a month ago, and I told him this because he was involved in a lawsuit. And I said, stay away from the judges because they're not going to like you. And this was a guy that everybody likes. And he says, this is so weird because we had a mediation with the judge. And he said, everybody likes me. The judge didn't like me. Of course he didn't like you. Jupiter was aspected by Mars tightly. So the Sun Jupiter is a wonderful aspect. But I think it's better. It's better if the aspect is 4 or 5 degrees, not so much 1 or 2 degrees. Now, if it's 1 or 2 degrees, the sun, the houses that the sun rules will be phenomenal. Okay, the sun will be super strong, but Jupiter will get hurt. What's your question?
My question is that Jupiter has 3 aspects, 5th, 9th, and 7th. So there is a 5-9 aspect of Jupiter on Sun. Even then, will the combination be the same, the aspect?
No. These are, I'm talking conjunctions now or oppositions.
Okay.
So if there's a trine to the sun, it will give some protection. It will give some faith in God. But it's different because then Jupiter's not hurt at all. Whereas when Jupiter's opposite the sun or conjunct the sun, then Jupiter's going to get hurt and the other planet's going to be super strong. So I'm just taking, I'm mainly, you can ask, but I'm just taking mainly the conjunctions and the oppositions. That's the reason why, because once we get into the other aspects, it's going to get more complex. Yeah. But those Sun Jupiter people, they'll always be lucky. They'll always be protected. It's a wonderful aspect. Sun Saturn, very difficult aspect. Now the Sun Jupiter will make the person like a Hare Krishna. They love to pray. They love to pray. They love to worship God. Sun Saturn or Saturn Moon, anything like that, or Saturn Ascendant, the person's a Shivite. They feel separate from the world. They have a detachment from the world. And they like meditation, austerity, fasting, avoidance of the senses. The Sun-Saturn aspect, the most fascinating thing about it, obviously Saturn with the sun is going to hurt the sun, and the sun is the soul. So the person's going to be lacking in confidence. They're going to be lacking in confidence. They're going to have troubles with the father, or the father is not around. But you also get leaders. Sometimes, not always, it's rare, but you oftentimes will get leaders with the Sun Saturn. They have managed to take the positive aspects of Saturn, which is responsibility and discipline and organization and humility. They've managed to take those aspects, use them really well, and they wind up being leaders. It's a bit rare. Most of the times, if I see a Sun Saturn or Moon Saturn aspect in a chart, or Moon ascendant, or Saturn ascendant, I start the reading by talking about that aspect first, because there's a good chance that they will not realize a lot of the stuff that I start to talk about, the positive stuff. They may not realize it. They may not achieve those goals because they're letting the Saturn hold them back so much. Sun Saturn is typical of rigidity, and that's why they have problems with the lower back and the spine. So the question is, are they physically rigid from birth and it makes them mentally rigid, or do they become mentally rigid and then their body becomes rigid? Who the heck knows, chicken or the egg? But they are likely to have lower back and spine problems. The only good thing I can see about Sun Saturn is humility, responsibility, and discipline. But the truth is, most people with the aspect abuse it. They're too humble. They don't allow themselves to get any recognition or abundance. They hold themselves back. That's not a good use of humility. But they always have a detachment. No matter what happens, they're not too attached to the world, and that's a great benefit. Okay. But it's not often very good for the father. It's usually strict, disciplined, not around when you're growing up. Sun Ketu is interesting because it's obviously very metaphysical and psychic and things like that. Not good for the confidence. The sun is your willpower. The sun is your willpower. And it's the Atma, it's the soul. So to be next to Ketu, it means that part of you is still in the spiritual world and part of you is here. It's not so good for the father. And the first thing I ask is, was the father into alcohol or drugs? But they don't have to be. The father can just be weird or strange. Okay? Really, weird or strange. And it is very good also for film and photography, magic, oil, gas. It can be good for those kinds of things.
The question being that either you go into one of these like flame or photography lines or something wherein you're putting this Sun Ketu energy to use, or you find yourself slowly and steadily drifting towards the spiritual world.
No, they're both there. They're both there. Most people immediately get the spiritual metaphysical. If they want to do film or photography, the talent will be there. Right. But some people will go towards it and some don't. I never really know which ones will and won't. But if the chart is artistic, if it's got the arts, and I see almost any planet next to Ketu, not Saturn or Mars so much, but the other planets, if they're near Ketu, then I say, when you're doing the arts, think about film and photography. And then there's the Sun Rahu. Now, the Sun Rahu is a really interesting aspect. It can make a person an egomaniac. It can make them have a huge ego, things like that. But I want to talk about conjunctions to Rahu from the Western perspective. This is extremely important. I might have mentioned this in another YouTube, but this you must understand this. So in Western astrology, the South Node is your past life energy, and the North Node is what you're supposed to go toward in this life. So my South Node's in the 4th house. That means in past lives I was with home and family. Now I'm supposed to be going toward the career and the public, because the North Node's in the 10th house. Now, wherever the North Node is, you're supposed to be going toward that area. That's a good area for you. If it's in the North Node's in the 2nd house, you're supposed to be going toward money. So that's a good area to go towards. So if any planet is within 5, 7, 8 degrees of Rahu, of the North Node, that planetary energy becomes very easy to access. So it doesn't matter where Rahu is. I'm going to say North Node because it's a Western concept, but it's going to work for the Hindu as well. So if the North Node can be in the ninth house, going toward religion and philosophy. But if Venus is there next to the North Node, because the North Node is an area that you're going toward, it's very natural for you. It's very easy for you. If a planet is there, it's going to be simple to access that energy. It's where you're headed anyway. So the North Node's in the ninth house with Venus, let's say. It doesn't mean, oh, now you have to go toward religion and philosophy with the arts. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is anything the person does with the arts
succeeds.
Anything that they do with jewelry, sweets, clothing, making people happy, film, is going to succeed. If Mercury is near the North Node, anything they do with writing, teaching, communications is going to succeed. This is assuming that the person's not dysfunctional, that their chart is not ruined by Saturn hitting the sun and moon and ascendant. Any planet that is there, okay? So if you take Mars, Rahu people, they are the most sexual. They can have sex for hours and hours and hours. That's just Mars, Rahu. Mars, Rahu can be, when they go to do sports, Mars becomes very strong. But what you want to tell the client is any planet that's near the North Node, you can use that and you will succeed with it. Forget the chart. Just go toward whatever that planet is. It's going to work.
If there is absolutely no planet out there, then what do you do? What did the planet next?
You just read the chart. You just read the chart. As you read the chart, you read the chart like you read the chart. It's, in other words, this is just something that is, it's just a part that, there's all kinds of aspects in astrology. You might see Sun-Venus conjunction, Mars-Venus conjunction, a planet next to Rahu. But you see the planet that is near Rahu is going to be very easy for the person to succeed with.
Okay.
Jupiter, religion, philosophy, it'd be very easy. College, whatever it is. So it's a very...
And if it's sun.
Okay, so if it's sun, leadership. That's why the ego they become egomaniacs sometimes. The sun becomes very powerful. But it means if they want to go towards government, the sun is government, authority, dignity, like that. Now the sun as the father being near Rahu could mean that the father is domineering, obsessive, pushing you, domineering you, like that. That's Rahu is domineering. If it's moon Rahu, it's going to be the mother being too intense, like that. But Sun Rahu aspect is an aspect that I generally like. Really, any planet conjunct Rahu, I'm pretty much going to like. However, if you have Mars or Saturn conjunct Rahu, and you come to the Rahu period, Rahu's not going to function very well next to Saturn. It won't. You'll have a rough dasha. Okay, so we'll move to the moon.
It did happen, James. It did happen. I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but it is so totally in conjunction with what you have said, because 2013, remembering that Saturn and Rahu in transit had come together in Libra, and that is the time when we heard partnerships, when we heard about marriages, extremely steady partnerships and marriages absolutely coming out in the open and saying that they're going kaput. So there was a lot of hullabaloo, and as you said, that Saturn Rahu conjunction is not good. We saw that in transit also. So what does that mean when you see it in a natal chart?
Saturn Rahu?
Yes.
So you're talking a completely different thing now. You're talking mundane.
Yes.
Yeah, that's mundane astrology. So in the natal, the Saturn Rahu, that's a hard one to describe. It's going to cause troubles. It's probably going to cause troubles to whatever house it's in, because there are two malefics. I don't know. It's funny. I haven't seen that many charts with Saturn Rahu. I don't know exactly what that's going to do, but it is going to cause problems. I think it'll be good with the career because Saturn is a career planet. And in the same way the person's going toward the North Node, they're now going toward Saturn. So Saturn is career and organization and discipline and things like that. But it's going to cause a lot of troubles in the house that it's in.
Okay.
So the moon. So the moon is the emotions and the feelings and the nurturing in childhood. And the moon is the sense of deserving. More than anything, it's the sense of I deserve. So if the moon is afflicted, you don't get good nurturing in childhood. You're sick all the time or whatever. If you do get good nurturing, the moon is good, then you feel like I deserve to have love. I deserve to have money. So if the moon is afflicted, that's when there's a lot of troubles with deserving. And you have to work with the client and say you need to look at why you think you don't deserve these things. And it's connected to the moon. So the moon Mercury is a nice aspect for the intelligence and the intellect, but the mind never stops. There's several aspects with Mercury, Mercury Jupiter and Mercury moon. The mind never stops. And if the moon is opposite Mercury, that can be a problem. I've had people with moon opposite Mercury, and you explain something for 5 minutes that you think that they've understood it, and then a minute later you find out they didn't understand it at all. They come back and they say, wait a minute, I'm confused now. They're confused because the moon is the common sense and the memory, and Mercury is the intellect. So the memory and common sense pulls on the intellect, and you get big problems. Anyway, the moon conjunct Mercury, though, is a tremendous aspect for a person that's going to have lots of ideas, and they're going to be very good at communication. But something that I oftentimes will tell people if they have Mercury and moon conjunct is to understand that their opinions are going to be very strong because you perceive through all the planets, but the moon, you're perceiving life through your feelings on one level, and you're perceiving life on the level of your intellect.
Right.
So my Mercury is in Libra, I'm perceiving things this way. My moon is in Aries, I'm perceiving things this way. When they're conjunct,
I'm perceiving it one same way.
Everything is the same. So they can't understand why don't you agree with what I just said? What I just said made such perfect sense. Well, because my Mercury is seeing it this way and my moon is seeing it that way. But it's a nice aspect. It's not an aspect that's a problem. Only if it's opposite and really tight, then it can be a problem. The moon Mars. The moon Mars is a temper. You may not see the temper necessarily often, but when you see it, you will not believe what you're seeing because it will be
volcanic.
Yes, it'll be much more intense than you realize. The moon Mars for a man is not very good because the moon represents women. And the moon being with Mars, they're going to have fights with women. Okay? I don't know. It's possible that women with moon Mars might have fighting and friction with other women too. I don't know. But the moon Mars is, it's not very good for the moon.
Okay, so if it's moon Mars in opposition, that is you've talked about conjunction now. So if it's in opposition, then also will it have the same effect?
It's worse. It's way worse. The problem with that is Chandra Lagna. If you have Mars 7 houses away from the moon, you're going to fight in those relationships. It's going to be the same as if you have Mars in the 7th house. I've said this many times. I don't use Chandra Lagna. I don't use Chandra Lagna for the whole chart. I have too much information to talk about. There's just too much. And I don't find it that dramatic if I do the whole chart. Oh, look, these planets are in the 10th house from the moon and these are in this. I just don't find it that dramatic. But any planet opposite the moon, I find extremely dramatic in the relationship. See it all the time. You think the relationship's great because the 7th house is good, and Saturn 7 houses away from the moon is terrible. It's like having Saturn in the 7th. But moon opposite Mars is more difficult with other people, way more difficult. Oppositions in general, oppositions mean me or you. I don't care what planet it is. It could be Jupiter, Saturn. It could be Mars, Mercury. If two planets are opposite, when you are, let's say it's Mercury, Mars. If I am functioning through the energy of Mars, you know, I'm expressing my Mars, and Mercury is opposite that. Then what happens is when I express the Mars, it's always like me or you. So it's like two people. This is why a lot of times if I see relationship-oriented planets, Venus opposite Saturn, Venus opposite Mars or something, I will say, yes, you'll have relationship problems, and most likely, because they're opposite, most likely that person, you have Mercury, Moon, Saturn, that person is dishing out exactly what you dished out to that person in a past life. This is different from you just have a 7th house affliction. You have a 7th house affliction, Venus is afflicted, and all your relationships are difficult, right? This is different. This is different from Venus's opposite Saturn. Now what happens is, and most people are not using Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but I am. So if I see Venus opposite Uranus, opposite Neptune, opposite Pluto, I take it that like the simple afflicted 7th house and afflicted Venus just means you have problems in love all your life.
Right.
But if you talk to someone who has Venus opposite Saturn, opposite Mars, or Moon opposite Saturn, you know, like,
I am
then what
understanding.
happens?
Yes.
Then what happens is that the person has a relationship problem that is huge with a particular person, and because they're opposite each other, it becomes much more karmic, like you specifically hurt that person, they now give it back to you. This is different from just an afflicted 7th house. That's where all your relationships are problematic. The other, with the opposition, is you dished it out to that person, they're going to dish it back to you now. That's how I see it. So the Venus...
It's not just about the 7th house here. What you're trying to make it, the opposition is actually anywhere. Any of the 12 houses can be involved. 1, 7, 2, 8, 3, 9.
Yeah. Chandra Lagna is not talking about the 7th house.
Yeah.
It's just if you have a planet 7 houses away from the moon, that planet is going to be functioning like it's in the 7th house.
Right.
So
it's constant battle with that person, constant battle with that identity. It can be, the persons can change, but the identity. So if it's a Sun Mars, then it can be Moon Mars. So throughout, depending on the houses, 5, 11 or
the houses don't matter. Forget the houses; they don't matter. With Moon Chandra Lagna, the houses don't matter.
Okay.
They don't matter. I don't care if it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd. It doesn't matter. The point is, the planet is 7 houses away from the moon. It's going to function like it's in the 7th house.
Exactly. So the mental mind frame with that person will be always at war.
If the person has Mars 7 houses away from the moon, they're going to choose partners that they fight with. They're going to choose partners that are aggressive. They're going to choose partners that are in the military. It's going to be Mars in the 7th house. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Moon Venus is the most luscious aspect that you can possibly have. It is just lusciousness. You get to enjoy the greatest beauty and fun and enjoyment, but it also can be a person that goes overboard. They can, they can go overboard in sex or drugs or alcohol. They can do that. But Moon Venus, if a man has it, it's just lovely, because when he gets around a woman, they feel completely comfortable. They don't feel like they're, oh, there's a guy, what's he want from me now? No, they feel, oh, there's a guy, oh, how nice, what a nice guy. That's what it is. The Venus moon is obviously very good for the arts. It's good for love matters, but it's really, it's not a great aspect to have so much for married life, because the Moon Venus wants to enjoy everything. So the Moon Venus is not thrilled with
cannot be restrained to just one
right,
relationship.
Right. But that does not mean that Moon Venus definitely means the person cheats. I don't mean to say that. I'm just saying that a Moon Venus person, I dated a woman who had Moon Venus once, and this woman felt very guilty. She felt very guilty because she loved sex, and she just loved that aspect of life, and she felt like and I said, look, if you were born with the Moon Venus, that means that this is what you're supposed to experience. It's not a negative thing. If you have it, that means that that's what this life is, because as long as you're not hurting anybody, that aspect is a lovely aspect. So that's a very nice aspect, and it's great for the arts, and it's great for doing, and it's great if you want to do any kind of business with women, jewelry, clothing, perfume, anything like that. The Moon Venus is going to be wonderful.
So you make a good salesperson then. You make a good salesperson. You make a good salesperson. You can sell your craft and your merchandise to people, ladies, much more easily, because you're able to convince them.
The thing is, anything with women is going to be good. Anything. If you're a doctor, you do it with women. Anything with women is going to be good. If you want to talk about selling something, the best salespeople are the Jupiter people. A person with Sun Jupiter, Moon Jupiter. This is you see this? Oh, this is fantastic. This envelope that's already used. You will love this. Even though it's used, you're going to love this. They can sell you anything. The person who's terrible at selling is the Saturn person. I have this envelope here, but it's already been used. You probably don't want it. Saturn people are not good at selling. Okay. The Saturn person is good at buying.
Okay.
They're good at buying. That's too expensive. I won't pay that. No, I have limitations. I won't pay that. But the Jupiter person can sell you anything.
Okay.
The Moon Jupiter person, Moon Jupiter is kind of similar to Moon Venus in terms of good with women and good with females and things. Women will feel completely comfortable around a man with Moon Jupiter. And a woman that has that will do very well with Moon Jupiter, will do very well with spiritual teachers and gurus and things. The Moon Jupiter person, like the Sun Jupiter, has the best sense of humor, tremendous sense of humor. The Moon Jupiter lifetime is a lifetime of fun. Let's go to Disney World. Let's go have fun. No, I'm writing a book. No, let's go have fun. They just have fun. It's the most, out of all the aspects, that's the one aspect. Person just wants fun. They just want to have fun. It's good with spiritual teachers. It's good with that. But the Moon Jupiter, I don't find necessarily to be oriented toward religion and philosophy. It's only that way because religion and philosophy is too serious. The Moon Jupiter is like Santa Claus. They just want to have, they just want to have fun. Moon Saturn, the roughest aspect. Because I'd rather have Sun Saturn than Moon Saturn. Saturn moon means you walk around feeling, I don't deserve this, I don't deserve that, I don't deserve this, I don't deserve that.
So it's a low self-esteem that a person has.
Self-esteem will be low with Saturn Sun, Saturn Moon, Saturn Ascendant. Self-esteem will be low in any of those. But the Saturn Moon, it's very hard to convince them that they deserve something. They, it's the Moon with Saturn is more about they don't deserve, they don't deserve, they don't deserve. It's a very rough aspect. It's rough with women. I mean, anybody who has Moon Saturn, they're not going to attract abundant women. They're going to women of abundance and luxury. They're going to attract women that are more restricted and things like that. And it's usually very bad for the mother. Now, the best thing about the Moon Saturn, there's one benefit to it, although it comes at a ridiculous cost. So the Moon Saturn person in childhood, they get hurt like anybody else. They feel pain like anybody else, but they feel the pain 4 or 5 times deeper
than the others.
They feel the pain 4 or 5 times deeper than someone else. So what do you do when you're 3, 4 years old, 5 years old, and you feel the pain and it hurts unbelievably badly? The most typical response is, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back to this area of feeling. I'm going to go towards mathematics. I'm going to go towards facts and figures. They, in other words, by the time they're 20 years old, you could say to them, do you love this woman? They go, I don't know. They don't know because they can't get in touch with their feelings because they stopped trying to feel anything because the pain in childhood was so deep.
Intense.
So, yeah. So when you get a person with Moon Saturn, you know that they're going to be good with math and facts and figures. And some of the people are good with those facts and figures and still have the ability to feel, to get to their feelings, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them just don't. The Moon Rahu is the best for dealing with the public. Mm-hmm. Again, because in the Western chart, the North Node is where you're going toward that North Node. And if the Moon is there, it's very easy to connect with the Moon, and the Moon is the public. It's the masses, it's the public. So that's a very nice aspect. But if the Moon is too close to Rahu, then the mother is smothering, intense, domineering, any of that stuff. Rahu, if it's a Rahu period and it's near the Moon, I think that's fine. Now, technically, we have all these concepts and theories. It was the sun and the moon that told Lord Vishnu there's a demon in the room. And Vishnu cut the Rakshasa in half. So technically, they're great enemies and this and that and this and that. But I don't find, the moon may be hurt by Rahu for sure. But Rahu will enjoy, as far as I'm, can tell, the Rahu dasha will be fine being it'll be better next to the moon than it would be isolated without the moon. Okay. Moon Ketu is simply the most psychic, metaphysical, astral, otherworldly aspect that we have. So if you go, we have a town in Florida called Cassadaga. It's about a half hour north of Disney World in Orlando. Cassadaga, Cassadaga. It's a spiritual, it's a community of mediums. I call them psychics. They call themselves mediums. So you go to that town, and there's 30 or 40 psychics that live there, and they do psychic readings for people. It's a lot of fun. The vibes in that town are wonderful. But if you were to go and get the horoscopes of those 35 or 40 psychics, you're going to find so many are going to have Moon conjunct Ketu. Now the problem with Moon, so the Moon is the emotions and feelings and the mind. The moon is the emotions and feelings and the mind, the common sense and the memory. So these people, their mind is off in the other world. So when you talk to a person that has the moon Ketu, their mind wavers. Their mind goes in and out. They're like, they're confused sometimes. They're not confused, but the mind simply goes in and out. It's just, they're not solid with the mind. It's in and out, in and out. But they are the best psychics. They don't need to look at the horoscope. They close their eyes and the information comes out.
Have you been there, just James, just for curiosity's sake? Have you been there?
Of course, Casadega.
Yeah.
I used to take my son when he was 12 and 13. I said, come on, let's go to Casadega. It's 2.5 hours away. We would drive to Casadega and we'd get readings. Now, most of the psychics I don't have much use for because they tell me what I already know. Oh, your life is like this and your life is, I already know that. I want to hear about the future. And there are some that'll tell you a lot about the future. There's a woman named Diane Davis, and she is in Casadega, and you can do readings on the phone. She goes into a trance, and she's very good. I went there some years ago, and she said, you're going to be going to California. And I thought, I'm not going to California. I hate getting on planes. I don't like that. I'm not going to California. A few months later, my brother said, there's a reunion at Carnegie Mellon. We were actors at Carnegie Mellon Drama School, and there's a 100-year reunion. You've got to come out here. I said, I'm not coming out there. He hassled me so much that I finally couldn't say no. I had to go to California. The funniest story was when she said, I see you at a microphone and you're upset because nobody's listening. But don't worry, it's not a big deal, right? So I thought, well, I'll probably be giving an astrology lecture and they're not listening. That's what I'm thinking, right? A couple months later, my son and I used to go out to coffee houses, and I would play guitar and he would play bass guitar or saxophone, and we'd play music and I would sing. And I was very excited on this particular occasion. It was a full moon. I was very excited because I just read a 900-page Beatle book about how well the Beatles connected with their audience before they were famous. So I go to this coffee house and I'm thinking, I'm really going to connect with the audience, right? It was a full moon. It was a full moon. They wouldn't shut up. They were having a blast talking with each other. So I sang very softly. They kept talking. I sang very loud. They kept talking. I stopped singing and started telling stories. They kept talking. The whole night was like that. The next morning, I'm in the living room and my son comes. He's about 15 at the time. And he comes up, he goes, Daddy, you're at a microphone and nobody's listening. Yeah. So I would take him.
Okay. Oh my God, the mediums. Oh my God.
Yeah. So Moon Ketu it's not an aspect that I like very much. I don't think it's very, I really advise them to wear a big pearl. I don't think it makes their life easy to be having one foot in the world and one foot in the other world. And the mother can be crazy or weird or strange. At best, she could be spiritual, but it's not likely. Usually these malefics, they'll give you the malefic part of them before they give you the good part of them. Mercury Mars. So Mercury Mars conjunction or opposition, whatever. The Mercury Mars is going to be the end justifies the means. So you have politicians, they'll say whatever they have to say, they'll lie, they'll cheat to get where they want to go. They will talk, they can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and then talk some more. They're good at that. It's not a very good aspect for the mental peace of mind. There's agitation in the mind a little bit, but these will be your lawyers more than anything. Law can be Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mars, Mercury, Mars, but Mercury, Mars is the really typical one. And presidents, US presidents, they're always Marsy. Once every 10 or 15 presidents, you get a Saturnian president. Saturn makes a person leader of his village. So if you have a good Saturn. So
Obama.
Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was Saturn in the first house, although Obama is pretty Saturnian. But Jimmy Carter had Saturn in Libra in the first house. And it was a disaster because people could not stand humility. They didn't like the idea of humility. They didn't like the idea of that we should become responsible and you know, do the right thing. They didn't like that, so he didn't do so well, but he was leader of his village. Mostly what you get are presidents with Mars, Venus, Mars, Mercury. You get real strong Mars, but it's a very good aspect for speaking and teaching, but like I say, the most typical thing is lawyers, and you have to watch out that they can cheat without a problem.
Yeah.
And if it's the opposition, they will be tremendous at solving puzzles. They will figure out, my brother has Mars exactly opposite Mercury. This guy has figured out every way to beat the system that you can possibly imagine. He figures out how to mark a check so that when you write a check to somebody, it goes to the bank because you've written something on the numbers on the bottom. It goes in the system and the system throws it out, and then they have to look at it. Well, that's going to take an extra day or two. So then he has extra time to get money in the bank. You know, just stuff like this. He just figures out how to beat the system. If he would take that energy and use it rather than beating the system just in a normal way, but that's what they do. They beat the system. It's not good on the nervous system.
So they can be hackers also. In one term, they can
Yeah, absolutely. They would be the best at it.
Okay.
It's good for Mars. It's not very good for Mercury. The nervous system will be frazzled a little bit, you know. And it's a very, like Mars in the fifth house, these people cannot be fooled, which is wonderful. They can't be fooled, but it's terrible. They have no sense of idealism. That guy, that guru, he's a fraud. They'll see all the fraudulent aspects. They won't see any of the good, you know. Anyway.
So Mars in the fifth house does not believe in people or does not have.
No. It's that they are practical. They don't get fooled. They're not gullible.
Okay.
They look at life and they see, 80% of the people are selfish. 5% are helping other people. They figure it out. They say, okay, the world's a selfish place. Okay, I understand. I'll deal with that. So it's wonderful. They know how to deal with the world. Mars in the fifth or Mercury Mars. But they lose. They never, you know, unless there's other aspects, they never have idealism. Oh, wow, this person is a wonderful, look what they're doing for the world. They just don't see that. That doesn't.
So the beauty of emotions, the beauty in life is kind of lost to them at one level.
The mental beauty.
Yeah.
They may have Venus in the seventh house and have beautiful partners and this and that, but the ideal, it's mental. It's when the mind can soar the heights of genius and see the art of Van Gogh. They don't get that so much. They don't, you know.
Yeah, I understand. The finer things in life is not accessible to their mind.
To the mind.
Yes.
But they may have Jupiter, Venus in this house, and they get the finer things in that area. But when it comes to the mind, they just, to me, it's terrible. But I have Mercury, Neptune. I'm the most gullible person in the world. And I have all these idealisms, and it takes me 10 years to find out the guy's a fraud and this and that. Because I'm looking at the finer
things and the beautiful things, more positive areas.
I'm trusting. They're not trusting. That's all. I get burned. They don't. But I get to have the enjoyment of, you know, for a while thinking, oh, this is perfect. There is nothing perfect here. But for years, you think this thing is perfect.
Yeah.
Mercury, Venus, the most artistic aspect of all. So music, if a person has Mercury, Venus, they are conjunction. They are constantly having music in the mind. It's great for the arts. Once in a while, I get someone that says, no, I don't have that. But most of them do. Now, the Mercury, Venus is the arts. It also means the person is likely to have come from a cultured background. The parents were artistic. the parents were cultured. They weren't like working class farmers that didn't like the arts. If you're born with Mercury Venus, you had some culture in your background somewhere.
Okay.
It's a wonderful aspect. However, it is the worst aspect for stubbornness. One of the worst. Okay, so there's other aspects that are very stubborn. Mercury and Taurus can be very stubborn. There's all kinds of there's all kinds of stubbornness. But when you get a person with Mercury Venus, Mercury is the mind. It's the opposite of Mercury Mars. Instead of the mind being agitated, the mind feels great. The mind feels great. And so, I had an idea. I think it's this way. It must be this way because it feels good. I think that this is the meaning of this investment. I think this will be this way. And you can go and talk to them and try to change their mind, and good luck with that. and they will get into trouble. They will get into certain trouble because of that stubbornness, because it gives more blind spots than any other aspect. Just as an aspect, it gives blind spots, and you can't help them with it.
Okay.
But it's a wonderful aspect, and they're fun to be around. Those people.
They're more sophisticated. They're more into
Cultured.
Yeah.
Yeah. Robert De Niro, the actor, he's always playing these thugs, right?
Yeah.
And we have a show called The Actor Studio where they interview actors. And at the very end, they ask them 3 or 4 questions. When you go to heaven, what would you like God to say? One of them is, what word do you love and what word do you hate? And they said to De Niro, they said, what word do you love? And he said, refinement. And then he said, what do you hate? And he said, boorish, the opposite of refinement. Well, he's got an exact Mercury-Venus conjunction in the house of the arts, of course. It's possible with that aspect that you might attract women that are fickle. Venuses, or a woman might attract men that are fickle, or, if Mercury is in the 7th house, or if Mercury is with Venus, and, then you have to watch out that you could enter into a love relationship where where there's not enough emotional commitment. It's just mental. Okay, it's just fickle and it's mental.
It's just time bound, or rather, it's just momentary. Can we say?
What?
As you said, the relationship is not very emotional. So it can be just a momentary relationship where you enjoy each other's company and then you drift apart all over again.
No. It means the person's fickle. It means that they attract a partner. If you have Mercury in the 7th house, you may attract a partner where, or Mercury 7 houses away from the moon. I have Mercury 7 houses away from the moon, but not tight. Mercury's 3 degrees and moon is 23 degrees. It's not tight.
Right.
Mercury is still 7 houses away from the moon.
Right.
I had so many relationships where my emotions were completely committed and the other person was just, the emotions weren't deep. There wasn't a deep emotional commitment to me. It was more like a mental enjoyment.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Yeah.
That's what you have to watch out for. It doesn't mean that you drift away. You could marry someone and you could be married to them even for 30 years, and their connection to you could always be far more mental than emotional. So that's what you have to watch out for. Yeah.
Okay.
Mercury, Jupiter, this is an aspect that it took me a long time to really see clearly. I'm embarrassed to say how long it took, because I used to see Mercury, Jupiter in Virgo, Mercury, Jupiter in Gemini, Mercury, Jupiter, and some other signs. And I would think, oh, this is fantastic. Two benefics conjunct each other. And the houses that Mercury and Jupiter rule are going to do fantastic. And I kept every so often finding, no, it's not true. No, it's not true. Until finally I started to really focus on it. And they're just not good together. Now, Mercury and Jupiter will make a person extremely good at having ideas. You want to have a think tank, they're the best. You want to have people coming up with ideas for a company, they're the best. The mind never stops. Now, depends how close the two planets are, but the mind never stops, which is not real pleasant. So I tell those people to definitely to meditate and do yoga, so to stop the mind, because the mind won't stop. But the worst thing is the nervous system. The nervous system gets, the closer Jupiter gets to Mercury, the more the nervous system gets whacked out. It gets too expanded. I remember a friend who had, a friend who had the Mercury Venus conjunction, and this woman loved music. And I said, well, you'd be great at singing because of Mercury Jupiter. She said, I can't hold a tune. And I couldn't believe, I said, you can't hold a tune. And she said, no. And her partner said, no, she can't hold the tune. That's nervousness. That's nervousness. Can't get comfortable enough to hold. The nervous system is too expanded. Jupiter expands whatever it gets close to. And it just, I don't like that aspect very much. What I mean, don't like it. What I mean is that I'm going to assume that Virgo, Gemini, Pisces, and Sagittarius, those houses are probably going to have problems if those two planets are conjunct. But it's got its benefits. There's no question. They love music, and they love art, and they love culture, and they can teach. They're great teachers. They're wonderful teachers. There's all these good aspects, but it's got these negative things that I didn't see for way too long.
James, I just put that combination as to what you said into a chart of a very close friend of mine, and I see it working like butter.
You mean it's like that, you mean?
Yeah, because he has Jupiter Mars combination, Jupiter Mercury combination in his third house in Virgo, in Scorpio. That means it's a Virgo Lagna, and I see his professional life being very hampered because of it. So I do see what you say.
It's a rough aspect. Mercury Saturn. Mercury Saturn is going to harm the nervous system. It's going to harm the confidence. Confidence we usually think of as ascendant and sun and moon, but Mercury is the nervous system. And if that nervous system is in trouble, then that's going to harm the confidence. And I see that a lot. The fascinating thing about Mercury Saturn is that in the young years, during youth, the person feels mentally slow. And they probably are mentally slow. And they get a complex about it. And a lot of them, because they feel like they're slow, they focus a great deal of attention and they become very accomplished with mental activities. So certainly the houses that Mercury rules are going to be really harmed. Depends how close they are, of course, right? So everything I've been saying, I've been talking about aspects within 4 or 5 degrees. If these aspects are 20 degrees, some of these things will come to play, but they will not be so intense. But the Mercury Saturn, it's likely to be, knowledge. There's likely to be a lot of knowledge in the lifetime, because Saturn is wherever Saturn is in the chart, that's where you're being disciplined. You have fear. Wherever Saturn is, you have fears. And so you're fearful there and you focus on it and you try to fix it. And with Mercury there, usually there will be a good amount of organization, administration connected to knowledge, something like that. And from another level, you could just say Saturn is cool. Saturn is, if you look in the books, there's like 4 or 5 different karakas of the 10th house. This is ridiculous. Of course, you have to look at the whole chart and the dasamsha, but if there's one planet to tell you about career more than the others, it's Saturn.
Right.
So, you know, like when I heard that Saturn Venus could be artists, I said, really? I thought that Venus would be destroyed by Saturn. But then you have to remember, Saturn is the career planet, and it's next to the planet of art. So Saturn next to Mercury oftentimes can make a person, you know, having a career that's with communications and writings and teachings and things like that. But it is very hard on the confidence. Rahu Mercury, I've already mentioned that Rahu Mercury, anything the person does with communications, media, communications, anything like that. You got to look at the rest of the chart, of course, to see what their career literally is or specifically is. But then, so let's say that you have a person in, you know, some kind of career, say they're in accounting, okay? How are they going to use the Mercury? Well, they could go out and advertise. They could go on the radio and speak about or write, you know, write some things that would get them some business. So even though their career is connected to this career or that career, you know, they can still use it. The career may have nothing to do with the arts, but if Venus is near the North Node, you just tell them anything that you're doing with that Venus is going to be, it's going to work. So the Rahu Mercury could intensify. Rahu might hurt Mercury a little bit. Rahu, I've said this a million times, Rahu does not hurt planets the way Ketu does. Rahu, in fact, that explanation from the Western of the North Node, that's probably why. But Rahu, and even Rahu aspects, often confer power onto a house.
Right.
But Ketu is not like that. Ketu doesn't function of the world, and we're in the world. So Ketu aspects hurt planets way worse. So
I would ask you a question wherein you always say that mundane is something that you don't do, but I am just...
It's not that I don't do it, it's that I'm not great at it. I don't know anybody that's great at it. And I'm just saying it's not the same. So you could say something about what happened in the world, and I won't necessarily say that's exactly how it works in the chart. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but then there's a Saturn and Ketu conjunction coming up pretty soon. That is supposed to be gloom and doom for so many, and people are terrified of it. But it's happening in the 9th house of the natural zodiac. I think people would get more and more righteous. I think people would get more and more streamlined towards doing what is right instead of doing what they feel is right, but what is supposed to be the thing that needs to be done. I feel that maybe the Saturn and Ketu conjunction will take them towards the path of the righteousness. I can be very, very wrong.
Maybe I'm telling you, I've tried mundane astrology. It's not easy.
Ketu, generally, what would you ascertain from the Ketu-Saturn combination?
In the transits, I have not seen a lot with Rahu and Ketu transits in mundane. I just haven't seen it. So I don't really, I don't see a lot in people's lives. So I don't really use, I know I'm going to be condemned by people that say that the best thing ever is the Rahu transits and Ketu transits. I just don't see a lot happening from them.
Okay.
I would assume that a Rahu or Ketu transit is probably a malefic transit, but I don't see big effects. Now, if there's two malefics, if there's a malefic with it, then it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to watch my 8th house. Saturn's been transiting my 8th house for a year and a half, and now it's going to be Saturn and Ketu. I'll see if it gets worse. But I don't know. I just don't know.
Okay, James, I'll take it like that. I'm just going to ask you, how would you read in a natal chart if Ketu and Saturn are together?
That house is destroyed. Unless it's
in that case.
I'm sorry, what? Unless it's an upachaya, that house is destroyed. So if you have Saturn Ketu in the 6th house, you will defeat your enemies easier than anybody. You'll probably have a weight problem from eating so much. You'll overcome your health problems. It's fantastic. Put Saturn Ketu in the 4th house, it's terrible. Put it in the 1st house, it's terrible. But if you put it in the upachayas, it's fine. But if you put it in the third, it's great for the third house and terrible for the siblings. You put it in the 11th house, it's great for large sums of money. It's terrible for groups and friends and eldest sibling. I
So
just
what
see
you're
them as
saying is the person associated with that house might have an issue, but the jara or the root level or the non-living entities of that house might prosper, but the living entities might face problems.
now you're talking upachaya houses. Exactly.
Okay.
And I write this in my book because people think, oh, I read that planets are good, malefics are good in 3, 6, 10, and 11. They're great in 3, 6, 10, and 11, but they're going to destroy the younger siblings and the older siblings if they're in the 3rd and the 11th. It just depends on how bad it is. If it's, one planet there, it's not so bad. Mars might not be so bad, but put Saturn in the 3rd or the 11th, and it's not going to help.
James just mentioned that he has written it in his book. The very fine thing is James is also getting these books on an e-platform. I did mention it in my last interviews with James. The good news is the book should be out in a day or in a week or so. So this book is in 2 parts: The Art and Practice of Ancient Hindu Astrology, available on Amazon for all who want to read it. It's fairly priced and it's a beautiful book. Having read it, I feel that it enriches us a lot.
Yeah, and this one is going to be in
2 parts.
2 parts, and it's $10 for each part. Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something. I spent 4 months updating this, revising it, updating it, editing it. And I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, an Indian publisher came to me and they wanted to publish this book in India. I said, okay. And he said, I want to do it in 2 parts. And I thought, why does he want to take my 400-page book and put it in 2 parts? But okay, he wants to do that. That's fine. He wound up, I don't know why, but it never got around to doing it. But having gone through this book for the last 4 months over and over and over and over, because I make changes and I have to go back and read. So I've gone through the book many times. And what I can tell you is I've always told people, read the book over and over and over and over, right? But I speak with, clients who have read the book and such, and maybe they read it twice or something. And what I find is that what I found when editing and reading it over and over is that the book is packed with
huge knowledge,
but it's not packed with theory. It's packed with, this is how it works. Now it's fine to read that and say, no, I disagree. That's part of the book, is this is what I found to work. It's your decision as to whether they actually work. But what I'm saying is I came to find out that the pages are so packed with information that is useful, not information to just read and sort of pass by. You got to memorize it so that you can use it. What I came to realize is that a person would actually be better taking a 10 or 20 page section and reading the 20-page section 3 times and then going to the next 20 pages. That's I'm just going to throw that out there, because after about 2 or 3 months, I could not believe the amount of practical information that's in there. And that's when I started to understand. I would have clients and they'd say they read the book, and I said, well, how did they not get the concept that I just spoke about? It's right in the book. It's because there's too much information. So.
Well, James, I can say that there's a chapter number 3 on retrograde there, that where you've talked about it's at every house. The lord of that house is retrograde, and honestly, that is the only book I found. I'm crazy about retrograde, so that was the only book I found where there is systematic representation of what happens when the lord of one house is retrograde. A lot of information on retrograde, which is very, very systematic, very arranged. And that is how I fell in love with that particular chapter in your book. And it's about
everybody falls in love with the part they like. I want to finish this one aspect because we've got more aspects which we can do in another session, but just to finish with Mercury, okay?
Right.
So Mercury Ketu is the most, like, there's really good aspects for Ketu. Ketu becomes really strong when it's with Jupiter, Venus, Mercury. But Ketu and Mercury is the one that you're going to see so often when you go to ashrams and people are spending their lives pursuing enlightenment. It doesn't mean that the Ketu is about enlightenment so much. It's just that Rahu and Ketu function best in Virgo, in spite of what the texts say. When you get Ketu in Virgo, it's really good for Ketu. When Ketu is near the ruler of Virgo and Gemini, when it's with Mercury, Ketu, which is everything psychic, metaphysical, astral, and otherworldly, picks up the intelligence of Mercury. And when you have Ketu with Mercury, these people are the best psychic, metaphysical, astrological. It's a wonderful aspect. It's terrible for Mercury. The person's mind goes in and out. You know,
It's kind of a moon Ketu aspect, kind of a moon Ketu aspect.
Similar, but not the same. The moon aspect, I think I dislike the moon aspect a little bit more because it's like the moon is you. The moon is you and your feelings and your emotions, and you're half here and half there and half here and half there, and it becomes a certain kind of wavering or confusion going back and forth that is more debilitating. The Mercury Ketu is simply just the intellect goes back and forth. The intellect goes back and forth and back and forth. It's not so bad. When the moon is there, the moon is your perception of the entire existence of life. And so when you're going back and forth, so anyway, so
yeah,
we'll
so we will
do
have
the
to
rest of the aspects another time.
Yes, we'll have to continue with James some other time. But before we leave, James has this book, another book of his, which is astrology of an Eastern astrologer through the eyes of a Western astrologer. It's a mix between the Eastern and the West, and it gives you the conjunctions, it gives you the aspect, and many other things. James, can we please have that book also? If you can please put it for the viewers to have a look at it.
So this is the How to Be a Great Astrologer. Now this is basically Western aspects. So you're going to get Venus conjunct Saturn, Venus square Saturn, Venus opposite Saturn, Venus trine Saturn, Venus sextile Saturn. You don't have to learn all of those things, but the opposition will work for you because it's in the Hindu, and the conjunctions will work for you. And it's saying what I've said, except it fleshes it out. I have one friend who, she's got all my books. She's had my books for 20 years. And she loves this one because she'll find an aspect that somebody has, a real tight aspect. She'll Xerox that page and say, read this. There's a saying that Stephen Arroyo was he's one of the best Western astrological authors. And he said in one of his books that if you can get one aspect in a person's horoscope that happens to be really strong, and you understand that one aspect, you understand the person.
Okay.
It's an interesting statement, but it happens like that. If you get one aspect. So this is that book explains the conjunctions, oppositions, and more, if you like.
So this was a real great session with James, knowing the aspect of all the planets and the conjunction opposition especially. It was great. In the next session we take up Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus. Now, this is going to get more interesting because James did mention that in his book he has the 90 degree, that is aspect also, and we know that Saturn has 90 degrees. Jupiter has a trine, so we are not going to leave him there, and we will ask for those also.
Let me tell you this. One of the reasons I was so lucky was that I studied with Santanam, who was a scholar. But then when I went back to India, I studied with Padya, who was a practicing astrologer. And he would tell me things that were not in the scriptures, but he had found to be accurate. One night he said to me, I have marked that if a planet is in a particular degree and there's another planet in the same degree, they are aspecting. And I thought, that's Western astrology.
Okay, so this is fun, and we look forward, James, for the second half with with the full attention on. So we hope to have you back. Till then, have a great time, James, and we wish to see your book released ASAP.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.